Hello, everyone. Welcome to Angular Componentization. So we talked about this before, and it was really about the philosophy of how we take a complicated interface and break it down into smaller pieces. So what I want to focus on now is more the syntax and process of doing that with some finished stuff. So I pushed out that the Google search results repo that I'm going to be working off of earlier. And hey, let's just dive in. I'm going to pull that down too. All right, so clone down this repo. npm, oop, come on, man. Monday for everybody. I install it. Oh God, I'm still having that node problem. Actually, before it gets too fussy with me. Shh, there we go. Switch my node versions while I'm at it. All right, third time's a charm. Let's install with the correct node version. All right, and there we go. So I should now be able to start me up. And while it takes forever to bundle this app, I head my browser over to localhost 4200. We're any minute now. There we go. All right, so there's Google search results. What I want to do is keep that exactly the same, except with components. So if I start that server again, and take a look at the template for it, by and large, just regular HTML. I'm doing a little bit of binding for the font awesome, for the icon font stuff. But other than that, really just regular old HTML. There's one other place I did a little bit of Angular wizardry. Yeah, this. I bound the background image of those LIs there. But, and like those will need to be dynamic, but otherwise, pretty straightforward. Over in the component TS file, I'm pulling in all of those font awesome icons and making them available in the template here. As a reminder, the way that we take something from the outside and make it available in a component is to import it and then make it a public property of the component. So things like this data, here's a whole bunch of data that gets used in this thing. Import it, make it a public property. That easy. Okay, so the componentization process. I think the least intuitive part of this is you should start from the inside. So like you see how the whole thing ends up being these little, like if you drew it out, it would look like this. Where there's that, and then this closes, and that, and that, that. And so like this is the ragged edge of the template. See how it kind of comes down the side here? Where you want to start is like deep into this. Your temptation will be to take these huge chunks and pull those out. This is a mistake. Take the super deep ones, extract those into components. Work from your deepest stuff to your least deep stuff. So something like, this is perfect. This deep link component. So we've got, it's got a heading and a link and something like that. And I've got more than one of them. Perfect candidate for a component. So if I do something like npx ng generate component deep link, makes those files for me, then I can hop over here and pull up deep link HTML. I can copy all this stuff in. Like that. And then really without doing anything else, let's make sure I can find it on the screen. So this full 50+ hour, where is that?
It's tractors right there.
Yeah, right here. So I want to keep that the same while I move this over. Easiest way to do that is I should just be able to say app deep link like that. Do I have two of them now? All right, I got two of them now. So I get rid of this one. And there it is. Smallest amount of work you can do to componentize something. Now, if I want to do that for this other one, that's where we start running into a problem, because this has a different link and it's got different text and different heading and that kind of stuff. So now I need to figure out which parts of this are actually variable. So the link is, the heading is, and the text is. So what if over here I did like bind link URL to something, heading to something, and content to something. So now it's going to be mad at me because I don't have those properties. The deep link component doesn't. Okay. What if I go over to the deep link component and put those properties in? And then these are going to be props. So that means they need the input annotation or the decorator. Which means I need to import that. I'm not using the constructor and I'm not using this lifecycle interface. So I can yank that out. All right, now back over here. Is it still mad at me? Link URL, heading, content. That's pretty good. So then the next thing that I would do, take these things out. So that link text, move that into where I'm using the component. This is the heading. And then the content is this. Now, this is an easy thing to screw up. Watch closely. I'm not passing these strings. All three of these are strings. I am not passing these strings in. Right now, it's looking for a property called https rancher.com/free courses on this class file. To pass this in as a string, I need to nest the quotes like that. Because I'm passing a string into this thing that's looking for a binding. So then if I head back over to the template, this can turn into link URL, heading, content. And so if I did all that right, it's still there. And I can prove it. If I change tractors to yeehaw, well, come on now, don't make me look dumb in front of my friends. Oops, something screwed up here. Type undefined. It's not undefined though. All right, let's debug. Okay, so this error says that type of undefined is not assignable to type string. And that's the case with all of these. It's in the app component template. I don't know why it still thinks I'm not passing anything in though. That's kind of curious.
Are you supposed to have double quotes? Because on like your, you have double quotes. You have single quotes and then double quotes as well.
Right. So what did I say about that?
I've walked away from my desk. I apologize.
You're good. So that is the thing that you are
Have to
most
pass a
likely to
string.
screw up. If you're trying to pass in a static value, just the double quotes is going to look for a public property to pass in. If I want to pass in just a string, it needs to be quotes inside quotes.
Okay.
I am curious why
It's not giving you the undefined over on the other file, like your component, right? It's not. That's fine.
Oh, well, no, that's should be fine. I might be able to just maybe it doesn't like that I gave those defaults.
That's what I had to do for Wineflix to pass TypeScript.
So is that? Oh, John's talking from the terrorist basement that he's being held in.
John, are you okay? If you're not okay, just blink twice.
I didn't have the microphone down, and it's all echoey in here, so.
No, I should be able to default those. That's normal world. Link URL heading content. Link URL heading content. Let me try recompiling that. Oop, quotes are not supported for evaluation. What the fuck? All right, maybe it wants me to throw those on a property.
When I did it for WineFlix, all I did was define the types and it was fine. It didn't yell at me then.
All
So
right,
John,
there we
you
go.
did just this equal string, not equals, but
There we go.
colon string.
Hey, look.
Yeah.
Yeehaw.
Okay.
The compiler was just having a hard time catching up. So if I change that back to tractor, it recompiles and I got tractor. All right. That's the process. Ask me some questions about it.
Can you show your deep link TypeScript file again? Thank you.
And what was the CLI command to get that deep link? I tried and it muffed me. Generate component deep link. Yep.
So you don't put the module in the name of the component, so it shouldn't be app deep link. You don't put the type of it, so it shouldn't be deep link component. It's like a rest of development. Oh, we just say component, buddy.
So the CLI is giving an error that says cannot find generate component in the home structure file. Is that?
Why don't you screen share it? Let's take a look.
Yes, absolutely. Was trying to keep up. But...
All right. npx generate component deep link.
It's supposed to be NG, not NPX.
Yeah.
Just NG
Nope,
generate
no.
component deep link.
npx ng.
So
I don't have to do the NPX.
I know.
I just do NG.
I know. Remember when we talked about that on Friday? That you shouldn't use the global installs?
No, why?
Because global installs in NPM have a host of problems. You want to use the locally installed one.
Okay.
Because think about it this way. Let's say you've got 5 Angular projects, and they're 5 different versions of Angular. You can only have one of those globally installed. Yee, rough. If you're always using the local one, though, never a problem.
thanks, guys.
If we started off using global, can you switch to local or just don't do it from now on type
No,
thing?
if you use npx ng, it will use whichever. It'll first look for whatever one that you have locally installed. This is a very minor problem. That's like not anything to like roll a sweat bead over, but one of the things that npx gave us is the ability to not have to rely on global so much, especially for tools like these scaffolding things, because it was a nightmare. But now npx abstracts out all of the worst parts of managing this so that you don't have to use global installs anymore. And then the way that you use your initial scaffolding command, because like you don't have a project yet by that point, there is no local version. If you do npx at angular/CLI, it's exactly like using the ng command directly. Awesome. Let's hang out here for a bit. More questions about this process.
Can you talk about the input prop again?
Totally.
That's
I
exactly
know that
what I
you
was
said
going to
in,
ask. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I know you said that I'm looking at the curriculum right now.
Mhm.
Properties that are set outside the component are
Mhm.
annotated with the @input decorator.
Correct.
So I guess I'm just trying to figure out where exactly we did define them and where we're importing them.
Great question. So let's explore that a little bit. So right now we have 2 components. We've got the app and we've got deep link. Questions so far? Cool. Deep link has 3 like kind of placeholders in the template. It's got the link URL, the heading, and the content. These don't get defined in here because I have more than one deep link. I want like a placeholder for what that is, but this thing doesn't, it's not in charge of the data for that. App is. App has a link URL and it has a heading and it has the content. Now, right now, I'm just hard coding them in here when I pass it in. But that could come from an API, that could come from a file, that could come from anywhere. This deep link component doesn't know and doesn't care. All it needs to know is like, yo, what am I putting in these placeholders? So the way that you specify that something is a placeholder is by putting that input decorator on it. That's how it knows. It should be expecting those like from the outside being app. And then magic moment happens when these get passed into the placeholders. That's what's happening with our one-way binding there. So the process of getting this from the outside to the inside, that's a one-way binding. That's what happens right at the point that this component meets this component. That's these things right here. Inside of the deep link component, we need to tell it, we can't just put past anything we want into a component. We need to tell it that that we're expecting these things and this is their types and this is what I want to call them inside the component, all that kind of stuff. And then this is how we use those in the component template.
Okay, so some follow-up questions just to make sure I'm
Please.
understanding. All right, so app is the HTML file that we're actually passing that hard-coded value, the link URL, the heading, and the content into. And that's why this lesson for WineFlix is called static Angular, because we're hard-coding the values. I'm assuming in dynamic, that's where you talk about the API integration, where we'll get that data, and then we'll pass it into the deep link to keep it in this example, or?
You're like 90% right, and right in all of the important ways. Really, the reason this is called static Angular is that nothing ever changes in it. Once the app loads, it's not like there's any interactivity with any of this. It doesn't go anywhere when I click these links. I can't type into something and then capture the thing that I typed in, then do anything with it. It doesn't update in real time. All of those things make an app dynamic. This is just a website that we made with a SPA tool.
Okay, and so for static, we're probably going to do, is it safe to say for static apps, it's mostly, if not totally, one-way binding? Because two-way binding sounds like you might have it in like a dynamic setting.
Correct. So that's why we don't need to worry at all about events or two-way binding or any of that stuff, because that relates to making an app dynamic, capturing input, events, what have you.
Okay. I'm starting to understand the static versus dynamic thing now.
Good. Yeah, once I load this page, nothing else ever changes about it. That's static.
When you say that the data is coming from the app portion, like right now we just have it hard coded in
Correct.
the app template. But I noticed with that data that we're importing, we could pull it all in from the app component using the huge object that
Yes.
is in that data file.
Yes. So if I did that, so all of that is living there. Let's take a look at that data file. So this thing right here, that's all that same data. So that's going to be search results, deep links, and it's the second deep link. So I could make like a second deep link property that's equal to, I need to make a getter. I can make it equal to this dot data dot search results dot what was it? Search results dot deep links, and I want the second one. Oh, doesn't it though? Oh, it's because this is an array. I see. I should have trusted TypeScript. It was telling me that it didn't exist on it. See, this is one of like the coolest things about TypeScript. Regular JavaScript doesn't do this very well. Like VS Code helps a little bit because it's using TypeScript under the hood. But as soon as I'm like navigating this object, hey, what do you know? Like those are the things that are on that object. So I can say, hey, deep links. Why don't you give me the first one? And then like that's got the things that are on that. That's pretty cool. Okay, so let's say second deep link is all of that. All right. What is possibly undefined? I don't think it is, man. Let me off the hook there. What about there? Which object is possibly undefined? Not that one. All right, what if I escape hatch this? Do it. Oops, I mean there. Curious. So I can't tell which one of these it thinks might be undefined. Maybe it's, oh, maybe it's the, maybe it's those. Could be all of them, I guess. Yep, that was it. Every fucking one of them. Okay, cool. So, I can default that too. So it's like if any of those came back as undefined, then return back, what was it? Link URL, label URL description. Okay, so now I have this like second deep link getter.
I think you messed your URL up. It just says HT.
Oh, maybe I did. Good catch. All right, so oops, so I don't want it. I don't want to have any. I want a default. Okay, so now what this is doing is it's looking in this data property, which I imported out of this file. And it's got all this stuff in it. But I want to pull this particular one out. That's all that happens here. But now my component has a second deep link property. So instead of hard coding this string, I could do something like second deep link dot URL. Or second deep link dot heading. Note that these don't have the quotes inside. Oh, description. This one was called label. Now they are bound. Bound means that anytime that this changes, the entire app re-renders with whatever the new values are of those. That's why it's binding. If we did have a form, if we did have a dynamic app, and it changed any part of this data, now second deep link has a different value. That means that these bindings have different values, which means that they would automatically re-render. That is the power of the single page app.
So that get method returns an object.
Correct.
And then you are binding the properties of that object onto those like link URL heading content. Okay.
Correct.
And so that had to be a get method. Why, as opposed to just a normal method?
That's a terrific question. The reason I made it a get method is because I'm doing a calculation here. It might have let me do that just as a property, but I kind of doubt it. Let's take a look, maybe. If I did second deep link equals this dot data, and then all of this stuff. Let's see if it lets me do that. Yeah, it did. Yeah, that's fine. I just did it because since it has some logic to it, that probably belongs in a function. But no, it's not mad about it. I guess it is just a JavaScript expression.
So this might be an unrelated question, but I guess just from a fundamental standpoint, why would you use a get method versus just a standard method? Maybe not particular to this exact example, because like you said, you could just make it an expression, but in general.
Should it be effectively a property, or is it taking an action? So if I have this, if I have like a message up here, and that could have some value, but let's say, here's a great example actually. Let's say this could be anything, including something that maybe has these like spaces on the side. That's like a little sloppy. So instead of accessing that message property directly, I could have like a get message a get message getter that returns this dot message dot trim. Can it not be the same thing? Yeah. Put an underscore in front of that. There we go. So like now I can access this with like app component dot message and get back the trimmed version. So I can dress it up for the ball a little bit. But like that would be used like, I guess since this is a class, it would be like some component dot message rather than some component dot message invoked, which looks weird because it's not an action. So why would you invoke it? Remember, like our methods are supposed to be kind of like verbs. Message isn't a verb. Get message is a verb. But if we're effectively just treating that like a property, it'd be a lot nicer to treat it like one. So we can do something like that. So yeah, getters are for things that are supposed to be treated like properties. Render, that's a verb. That should be a method. Calculate, that's a verb. That should be a method. Add, that's a verb. That should be a method. Sum, that's a property. That should be a getter.
I have a question for you. Sorry to take a few steps back here.
Love to. That's what we're here to do.
Line 23,
Yeah.
can you explain the extra question marks and periods that you put in?
I'm going to throw that back to the class. What are the extra question marks and periods?
I know that you were getting a lot of linting about this object could possibly be defined. So the question mark makes it optional, right?
A ternary, right? Or isn't that what it's called?
Ooh, not a ternary. Close, though. Same character. Almost. The entire operator is this. I think every single person has gotten this right on vocab. What is that called? It's 2 words.
It's a question mark.
Life cycle method?
Optional condition?
Well, we got part of it. Oh man, there's so many green check marks that I want to turn into red X's. This was from Intermediate JS. The optional
Conditional operator?
The
That
optional
wasn't it?
All right, look it up.
Chain. No?
Optional chaining operator. So let's pull up the relevant material. Let's see, this was part of Intermediate JS, modern JavaScript. Safe method and property access with optional chaining. So if we didn't have optional chaining, and we didn't for a very long time in JavaScript, here's the fundamental problem. Let's say that this .data is undefined. Okay, so that means that this expression would evaluate to undefined. Undefined doesn't have a search results property, so that's a runtime error. Yikes! So what we did instead was this .data and this .data .search results and this .data .search results at 0 and this .data .search results at 0 .deep links and this .data .search results at 0 .deep links at 1. That's how we had to do that before. Optional chaining is the exact same thing.
And I understand it wasn't a vocabulary word.
No, but it was in the questions. It was in the questions. Kyle, my linter was only yelling back at me about putting the optional chaining operator on deep links. By putting on the data and the search results, is that really? Is that just a safer way of doing it? Really, just by putting it throughout?
It was because I was trying to figure out where it was because it wasn't telling me why.
Yeah, mine was prompted as I was typing in my. It was trying to, it was trying to fill in what I was typing, it tried to fill in deep links with a question mark. It tried
Got
to
it.
put it on automatically.
Oh, I thought that was just the code saying like deep link. Is
No,
that?
no, it was actually saying like, are
So
you
that
looking
makes
for this deep links with the optional chaining operator on the end? It actually was trying to throw it on as I was typing it.
So I think what it was trying to say is that it is inferring this. I actually don't know why, because it's definitely assigned. May not have a value. And so it marks it as optional. I don't think it should, but I know why. Because if I do this, that's undefined. There isn't a sixth search result. That would make it undefined, which would make it not have a deep links property. That's why it's doing that. We got to the bottom of it, gang.
That makes way more sense. Thank you for going through that.
Yeah, of course. Let's hang out here
That
more questions about this.
That expression that you wrote to illustrate what line 24 was doing, that's similar to short circuiting, right?
That's literally short circuiting. Short circuiting was how we did safe property and method access before optional chaining.
Okay, gotcha.
That was where like 99% of developers learned about short circuiting.
Could we see the app component HTML?
Yeah.
And then the specific
Good
link
call.
that we're looking at
was here.
Beautiful. Okay, so seeing here that we have the app deep link, this is what's connecting our little component that we just made to our template. Is there anything else that's missing that we don't see right here that is also connecting the two together?
Yes.
Just to make sure all the bases are covered? Great, if we could see that too.
It was automatically added for us, but in the app.module.ts, deep link component got imported and added to the declarations for the module.
And those just got auto-generated in there?
Yeah, when you did ng generate component, this is one of the tasks that it does.
Okay. I see.
But that's how in the template it knows what app-deep-link is. That's what connects them. All of these components can see each other.
Okay. And I'm sorry to ask the obvious questions here. On the HTML again, this link URL, the heading and the contents, this framework that we're kind of building for it so that we can dynamically insert anything in here, where are we finding the link URL heading content like?
That's a great question. Here. When you bind something, it doesn't need to be called the same thing in both places. You could sort of think of it like this. If we could zoom all the way in on this part here. Like right at that boundary where they meet, you would see on the deep link side, link URL and heading and content. And then on the app side of it, they were called label, URL, and description. Oops. When they're bound, that's how those things get connected. So that syntax over in the app HTML component, in deep link, it's called link URL. In my component, it's called this. That's the binding.
Okay.
see the CSS link in the import, but I didn't see, and maybe I just missed it when I was letting the dog in. Where did you actually go in and adjust the CSS?
Great question. So the app component CSS doesn't have anything in it. For that matter, the deep link CSS component doesn't have anything in it. Yet, where did I put it? That's all styled. Who can tell me where the other place those styles could be is?
It's in style.css.
Yeah, styles.css. It's a handy dumping ground. It's auto-generated. It's in your source folder. Right here.
So does just default to that when you're, because if you have it showing the link to your that specific CSS, I'm just wondering, how did it know to go to your main one?
So this is actually, that's a really surprisingly deep question. And I think you guys are finally ready to hear the answer to it. So let's go back to my favorite diagram in the whole wide world. The client-server diagram. I ask for an HTML file. Server says, here you go. Now, okay, so we know that much. We actually haven't talked about how it gets the rest of the stuff. There's a step in between. It gets back this HTML, which, as you'll recall, this is just characters. It's not even a string. Strings have methods and stuff. This is just some characters that came back from the wire. What the client does when it gets that back, it starts building the DOM. In the process of doing that, it takes a look at an HTML file. It goes, all right, I'm going to add a node for this. I'm going to add a node for this. I'm going to add a node for this. So it starts at the top and starts working its way down. And it says, all right, there was it's an HTML thing that all this hangs off of. There's a head that's under that. There's a body that's under that. Cool. Head has a meta tag on it. And in case you're curious, attributes go on the nodes themselves. So that has a char set. So any attributes that are associated with it go there. Things that have text inside of them are a little bit different. So this has a title. Titles, it actually adds the text as a special kind of node. So Angular template becomes Angular template. That's called a text node. Any double-ended tag, whatever is inside of it is a text node. And then we keep going and we keep going and we keep going. Oh, hey, this one has an href on it. So we would say something like, this one has the link, and it's got all those attributes, including this href. As soon as it sees that, then it goes, ICANN has favicon.ico. And then that's an image, so it gets the beeps and boops for that back. Cool, so it's building out this tree. And let's imagine that the body of this has a div, which has a paragraph and has another paragraph and whatever else. So one of the things that it might find in the head, let's say this link goes to a CSS, like a style sheet or something. Or we have maybe another one that goes to a style sheet. So link, href, whatever. So it says, hey, CSS. Then it goes, cool, here you go. And then that same process starts happening again. It'll be like parse style rules. And then every single time this DOM tree renders, it looks through all of these style rules that are like part of the DOM, and it goes back and adds those to any matching element. So like if I have something that's like any direct descendant of any div that has a P that's a direct descendant, I want to make red. It applies these backwards. Remember learning about that? So it goes, all right, show me all the P tags. And so it looks through this whole tree and it goes, all right, I found 2 P tags. It goes, cool. Now only keep ones that are direct descendants of divs. And it goes, all right, is this a direct descendant of a div? It is. Is this one a direct descendant of a div? And it is. And then it applies this style to it. Every time it re-renders, it does that. All of these style rules, they just sit in the browser. They're part of the DOM. And so there's no concept that like it's associated with any particular thing. So that's app.styles in this case. Now with SPAs, it gets a little bit different because like these things here, those will only apply to things that are in this component. But if you take a look at how it's doing that, there's actually like very little magic behind that. So if I put a, go over to that app component CSS and say, make all paragraphs red. Take a look at what it did to my CSS rule. That's called a fingerprint. It's auto-generated by the framework. And you'll also note that it added it to every single element inside of this app component. That's the trick that it's using to scope a style specifically to an element. But all of the style rules for the entire page are just kind of in one giant jumble in the browser. And every time we re-render, it looks at every single one of these tags and figures out which of these rules apply to each one. That's some of the deep magic. But that's why, even though we didn't declare any of those styles, like all these are just in this styles thing, a component doesn't need to know that any of these styles were meant for that component. They're just applied if it matches.
Okay, so then the follow-up is, where did that document ever get linked if our HTMLs don't have that?
It gets added by the bundler when it makes the app. Because what it does is it takes all of these styles and it takes all the ones that it generates in the individual component ones and does the following. If I build this, npx ng build, it's going to take my style CSS, it's going to take every component file CSS, and it's going to concatenate them, just put them into one file, and then it's going to uglify them, which is make them as teeny tiny as possible, so that when the browser is doing this like requesting process, it's sending back the smallest file that it can. It does actually.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, it does the same thing with the JavaScript files. All of those different component files, they get concatenated into one enormous file, so that your browser only needs to ask for one file instead of 500 if you have like 500 components. All right, bundle generation complete. All right, these are the 4 files that it crapped out. This is my entire app. This is all the styles for the app. This is Angular itself. Polyfills are, oh, and by the way, if you have an old ass browser that doesn't support, optional chaining or like some newer feature, a polyfill is like an old school dirty version of all of those things that accomplishes the same goal, but it'll do stuff like convert your optional chaining to that stupid short circuit chain. Those are polyfills. All right, so if I take a look at these files that it made, all right, in this dist folder, if I look at the index.html it generated, quite a bit different actually than the one that was in my folder. And this one actually inlines all of those styles. It doesn't link to a file at all. Oh, actually, there it is. That was if you're not allowed to link to style sheets. Oh, that's stupid. That's a bad design. I don't like that. Anyway, here's the link tag, Julie. And like the mechanism by which all of that stuff works, that's build tooling. That's the tool chain stuff that I told you nobody 12 weeks into their career should be good at building tool chains. Angular CLI gives us an excellent one right out of the box. And all of the frameworks are like that. Create React App also has a pretty good one. Embers, I think, is like the best in the business. The Vue CLIs is also like exquisite. Yeah, we get all that stuff for free.
Pretty cool to see how deep it goes without, I mean, like, the more you look at it, the more you realize how much it's doing.
Yes. And gives us a little bit more insight into this joke. Let's see. This one. Like, all of these tools were just something that somebody made. It's ultimately just JavaScript. Your browser can't run anything that isn't just JavaScript. Even this tooling that doesn't run in the browser, it's just Node, which is just JavaScript. And like, yeah, and that's exactly how LeftPad happened. Nobody used LeftPad except library authors. And it was libraries that depended on libraries that depended on libraries that depended on libraries. Or there's another like, version of this joke that has been making the rounds recently. Let's see, it's like cool calculator. Man, all right, I can't. Maybe Google will help me. Fuck.
Was it that universal number counter?
Yes, that was it. Universal number counter. Oh, I have Twitter blocked on my computer. I protect myself. There we go. This. And yeah, zlib is absolutely on billions of devices, and that is probably one person's project. Even we just like tour the node modules for this. Every single one of these is used in this app that doesn't even do anything. And we're still in the A's. All of these were just somebody's project. Absolutely wild. All right, back to Angular land. More questions about any of this?
Can I see the app component TypeScript file
Yeah.
again? Thank you.
So the next thing I would do, I also have a deep link here. Okay. I'll do this one the other direction. What if I take that and have like first deep link that does that? Okay. Could I just swap this out and make that first deep link and have it still work? Yeah, I see them both. Although, ooh, exciting. Check this out. So that one ends at salaried. But this one has like all of this stuff. Those are way longer. That was part of this assignment, is like handling that. And that's exactly the kind of thing that you handle in a component. So the data, the app component gives you this entire string. But, okay, well, anytime this is used, that needs to get truncated and elided. All right? So over in the deep link component, we can handle that. We get in all of the content, but maybe we want, hey, a getter method that's called like truncated content. And this does something like return content dot length is greater than, I don't know, 20 or whatever. If it is greater than 20, we want it to be this dot content dot slice the first 20 characters, and then we want to elide it. Otherwise, just return all the content. Cool. So then, over in the deep link component, instead of referencing content, we can reference truncated content. Like that. Cool. Check it out. And then we can play with like, we can make like a private property that's like max length. And so that wasn't enough, so maybe 100. There you go. And like there's better algorithms for that that'll like only break on a word and like various things. But that's the general idea of that. And now app component doesn't need to give a shit about how many characters this can take. It doesn't need to do any of that work for it. It can go, here's the content, deep link component, you figure out how long it should be. Or hell, maybe that's even a configurable value that you pass in as a prop. All of those are legit.
Can you show your deep link component again?
Love to.
Thank you.
So if I didn't make this a getter, I would probably call it get truncated content. That's a verb. You can do that. So if I did that, then instead of doing that, I would have to do get truncated content and then invoke it. That's stupid. It's just a property. We just say truncated content around here, buddy. And we can do that with getters. More questions? So when you get to this point, all right, cool. Now we've got like that going on. The smallest step that I could take to making this more real, instead of having first deep link and second deep link, just having deep links. And I think I actually don't even need to default that. There you go. No, that does still need a deep link. So if it can't find that, default to that. All right, so now I can get rid of those properties. And then in my template, iterate. I can say ng4 let deep link of deep links, and then make this deep link.url, etc. And now it processes all of that based on the data. There they are. Still there. And now that's come a long way. That used to be like 3 times longer. So at that point, I maybe go, maybe deep links should be its own component. Oh yeah, especially since it has that thing down there. So we start this process all over again. We go npx ng generate component deep dash links, plural. npx ng generate component deep links. Could not find an... Oh, it's because I'm in the node modules folder. Come on, man. All right. So I can do the same process. Copy the HTML, deeplinks.html, put it in there. But now it's all pissy at me because it doesn't know what deep links are. All right. So I need to do something like app deep link, plural. And then this thing needs a deep links property stat. So I can say, all right, you need deep links. Well, I'm going to bind that to the deep links property, same one I was using over here. Then it goes, hey, I don't know what deep links is. Well, you're about to, bud. Head over here and tell it that it is expecting an input called deep links, which is, I should probably make a type for this, but regardless, we'll say that, and then update the import. While we're at it, we can get rid of the constructor and the lifecycle. All right, how you like me now? I was worried it would let me get away with not having a type for this, but alas. So type is going to be deep link, and the type of deep link is label is a string, URL is a string, description is a string. And then this is deep link, and there's more than one of them. Why is it indenting that? Oh, it's because I interrupted the component decorator. All right. Hey, check it out. 2 sets of deep links. Sort of makes me feel like I could delete one of them. I think it is a known element, man. Okay, so the second one is gone, and then I look back at that template and I go, hey, this more links thing, maybe I can figure out what's variable in that. It looks like it's a more links URL and more links. Maybe I can interpolate that. So it's like a URL and a link URL and a base URL. So over here I can say, oh, some other things we're going to need are a link URL, more link, which defaults to a string, and a base URL, which also defaults to a string. Something that I know that some of you have struggled with on this, whether or not something is required or optional. So I can say deep links is required. Absolutely need it. Do not try to use this if it's not. Oh yeah. I can also say, you know what? This is optional. So is this. Question mark means it's required. Or sorry, exclamation point means it's required. Question mark means it's optional. So check out what happens if I try to use these. Set that aside for right now. If I put in here, it was like a more links URL. Same thing here. That's base URL. And what's this mad about? App deep link is not a known element. Should be. Angular component. Verify that it's part of this module. I intend to. Yeah, these things are in the same module. Ah, there we go. Not bad anymore. All right, so I'm going to pull this back. That was the more links URL. So I can say this thing has a more links URL. Oops. That's equal to that. And also had a base URL. That was rancher.com. Oh no, I guess it'll let me do that. That's kind of interesting. Because more links URL and base URL are both optional, so they might not be there. I guess the issue is they're not objects, so I can't like accidentally do properties or methods on them. What I can do is, since they're optional, I can ng if this. Say, hey, if there is a more links URL, then render all of this. Otherwise, leave it out. Hey, look, there it is. Works. That is the process of componentizing static HTML. And hey, weird. I told you to start projects by writing static HTML. You've actually been doing that like the whole run. So you could do that for your own apps. And then even if you don't have an old man Coberly giving you wine flixes and Google search results assignments, you could probably componentize your own apps. That's kind of the point of this. This isn't some like arbitrary exercise that I'm doing for class. This is literally how I write apps. And I highly recommend it. Ask me some questions.
I really hope this isn't redundant, but the hardest thing that I'm trying to wrestle with right now is having a good mental model of how to organize all these different folders that we're trying to pull from and throw into, and then we're going to pull from this one and throw it into that. Could you give a recommendation or some advice, a good visualization on how we should be thinking about that?
Sure. So good news is in Angular, all those decisions are made for you, which is not the case in React or Vue. But if we look at the folder structure here, so source directory is where all the action happens. Also, everything in here gets like more or less copied straight over. So like if you have, for example, an image file, you can put it in here. You can put it in your assets folder. That's what we did with, oh, I still have the WineFlix things in here. You can put those in there, the data files in here. Like you have access to all of this stuff throughout the app. But within the app folder, that's where all the component stuff lives. And every time you make a component, it makes a new folder for it, and it puts the HTML, the CSS, the test file, and the component file in it. And that's it. Everything else is already like wired together for you via the module. So like when you want to use the deep links component, any component in this entire like app can use deep links. Can use deep link, could technically use app component. They're visible throughout.
If you're having a hard time organizing if you're having a hard time organizing, you can always, when you're generating a component, you can do component / and then your component's name and create a component folder and keep all your components there. And then when we get to services, you could do one and have services in there and could be helpful. I saw that on that video Parnell did of how another developer was doing his folder structure, and I'm like, oh, that's could be helpful for all these crazy folders.
Oh yeah, and so like with a big project, breaking it up that way is fine. You could also break it up by feature. So like you could say all of Google is in one giant repo, which by the way, that's true. Like Google's entire code base is one giant fucking repo. Like one, not like one GitHub organization or something like that. It's one repository. We'll talk more about that another day. It's fascinating. But yeah, like Gmail might be a folder in there. And within Gmail, it might be the primary mail features, and you might have another one for like RSS feeds, another one for ads that are in Gmail, and then like within those might have a components folder and a views folder and a services folder. So like the LMS. So I have this split up a few different ways. I have one big old components folder. And then I have a views folder. Views are also components, but they're ones that you route to. So when we start talking about the dynamic stuff, if a URL can go to it, it's a view. And then a view contains components. And then I have, like, hooks are the equivalent of services in React. I guess contexts or hooks and contexts collectively replace what services do in Angular. And then I have some utilities. I keep global styles that any component can use in one place. You can split this up however you want. But for WineFlix, you don't need to do any of that. And really, it's not even until like your app gets a little bit bigger that I would think about it. Maybe with router splitting into routable components and non-routable components, I'm into that. But otherwise, what things are called and what's visible to each other and all of that stuff, it isn't determined by the folder structure at all. So you can play with that stuff, move stuff around, it doesn't make any difference. The reason is, because like what a component is called is based on, what was it? Deep link. This thing right there. So as long as like that's the same, you can put it in any folder you want to. It'll still be able to find it. You might need to update this import if you move it around. But that's how those things map together.
And if you move something, VS Code will actively want to update for you your imports.
Amazing. The future is great. People used to have to write programs on punch cards.
I have one slightly off-topic question, but first, is it possible for you to commit just the changes you made without, so that, because I'm just having a hard time like wrapping my brain around it, so I want to compare the two with what I have.
Yeah.
And then the next one is Sass versus CSS. Is there a reason that you tend to use that instead?
So, like, if I'd had my druthers, we would have spent like a week on Sass. But based on the conversation I had with Ford folks, like, I really couldn't justify it. It's like, I don't think that most of you will be doing very much of that stuff at Ford. It's just too fucking bad. But the here's the quick story on Sass. It's just like TypeScript. It's like TypeScript for CSS, basically. So if CSS is this, SCSS is this. It stands for, like, I keep calling it Sass. I'm not like having a stroke or something. Sass is syntactically awesome style sheets. It's just CSS with a ton more features. Sass proper is a completely different syntax than CSS is, and it sucks. Nobody likes it. SCSS is all of the features of Sass, but it's a superset. So all you need to do to turn a CSS file into a SCSS file is just change the extension to .scss, and then you get all the cool SCSS features. The one that people tend to notice first is that you can nest your selectors. So, Pori,
I was wondering how you did that last week, and
Yeah.
it didn't make that connection.
Yeah, that's so I'll show you some cool Sass things. All right, so this one uses a bunch of them. So like this, you can import style sheets into other style sheets, which is really cool because things like sizes, that's a list of all the pixel values in my design system. And so then I can import them into another CSS file, or like it's that same thing with colors. These are all the colors in the LMS. And so I want to use one. I don't write out the color. I say which one I want to use. So like colors.gray6, colors.gray8, colors.primary3. If I wanted to retheme the entire app, I just change these values and it propagates throughout, which I had to do a couple of times. Like the warning failure and success are green, yellow, and red. The first like attempt I made at that was dog shit. And so I retooled it all and came up with way better colors for it. I didn't have to change any of my CSS. It just propagated throughout. Or mix-ins are another one. This means I want to take all of this and basically make it like a function. And so anytime I want to style a button, I can say, oh, by the way, use button primary, and it'll apply all of those styles to that. You can nest things. So like this, the little ampersand means take whatever selector this gets applied to, and if it's active or if it's hovering, then make the background color this. Like you can do some wild stuff with SCSS. But yeah, we like, I don't know, did you guys want the program to have more content in it? Like there was like no good reason I could justify teaching you SCSS, but that's what it is. And everything that it can do.
It's just the fun.
I know. Like it tormented me a little bit. Don't get me wrong. But if you want to learn more about SCSS, Sasslang. It's all here. This is what the alternate syntax looks like. There's no braces. There's no semicolons. It's all just based on indentation. And it makes me want to vomit. But yeah, SCSS is the same syntax as CSS. More questions?
You mentioned you write your apps with making them into components in mind. Like when you do that, how do you start? I mean, how big of a chunk do you start with before you start trying to put it into a component? Do you think about like a nav bar and then break that down into individual things, or like?
Okay, I know what you're talking about. So what I'll do, I'm like sketching out an interface. I'll go, all right, well, it's basically this. And then there's like a thing here and a thing here. And then some content here. And then this has a thing there. And so like, this is called a thumbnail sketch. So I'll do something like that, and I'll go, okay, cool. Now I want to start deving it. So I'll pick some macro piece of this, like that, and I will try to fully code and style this. And then I'm going to try to fully code and style like some small, like the left side of this. And then I'll try to do the right side of that. So I totally do that stuff up front. But I am sort of thinking about it with components in mind, mostly like because the isolation of components and like really good semantic structuring of HTML are actually like peas in a pod. So it's kind of the same thought process for both of those. Because like when I'm looking at this, I go, all right, well, what's the HTML for that going to look like? Well, it's going to have, let's see, is that an image? Is the image in a container? So like I try to figure out semantically what all of those things are about and what they mean. But the end result at the end of all of that is this, styled. And then I go, okay, how would I split this up into some pieces? And then, just like I told you, I would look for things like this. What's like a tiny piece that repeats, and what are the parts that are variable in it? So I would copy that HTML into a new template file, just one of them. And I would get that working. I go, okay, well, not all of them use FA ellipsis V. Not all of them say more. So those are the variable parts. So those need to be props. So I pass those in. And then I look at these other ones. And I go, all right, is this structured the same way? Yup, 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 yup. Nope. This one also can have an active class. So it needs to know whether or not it's active. So that becomes a prop also. But yeah, that's how I componentize an app. More questions? Cool. Hopefully this gives you some basis for like maybe having a more productive time with WineFlix. Yes, no, maybe so. All right. I hope your study session goes well. Otherwise, cheers.
Will you post this video soon?
Immediately.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.